Hello, it has been a while since a previous tutorial. Uh, I think maybe that's an understatement. It might be nearly 2 years, but I've unfortunately or fortunately been very busy with full-time work for quite some time. But it's kind of changing, and things are changing, and a lot has happened since I did my last tutorial. AI seems to be around, so we're going to get into that on another tutorial and discuss bits and bobs. But look, today literally just going to be showing you the new rigid body dynamics within Bifrost. I'm sure there are some other tutorials out there. It's a pretty new feature. But I'm just going to show you how to create this simple rock hitting a rocky surface, a cliff top, and then falling, crashing, and kind of like breaking up some more when it gets to the ground. So there's a couple of extra steps in here rather than just like a standard rigid body that we're going to cover, right? So let me, without further ado, start fresh. So let's just kill everything. Because I don't want any spoilers, right? So this scene, quite simply, is from Megascan's couple of meshes. I've got 1, 2, 3 meshes for the cliff tops and the ground. Sorry, let me just move my microphone slightly so you can hear my voice. Okay, where's our rock? I've probably put that on a display layer. So, again, rock from Megascans. Nice and simple. So, first of all, let's keep things simple. Let's create a graph and let's bring in our rock for starters. My outliner is over there. So we've got our rock, and let's say we just want to do a standard rigid body simulation. So we're going to hit tab and we're just going to start typing rigid body. And we can see here we've got the basic rigid body graph, much like other elements within Bifrost that allow you to start off, like basic particles, basic aero, etc. So you'll be quite familiar with that term. And then we're going to right click and we're going to hit explode, which gets all of our nodes out. So I'm quite excited about this feature. Obviously, I've been waiting for rigid bodies for quite some time. There's still a long way to go. The dev team are working on this tirelessly, constantly. So expect lots of changes and improvements as we go forward. So, with the rock selected there, we're just going to put that into the rigid body because we're going to want it to fall based on like physics forces, okay? And then I'm going to use this central cliff top, quarry top, for a collider because I don't need to create collider all the way over here because I can pretty much see that this rock is just going to fall downwards. So why create a much bigger one? You can, of course, do whatever works for you. And we're going to plug that into the static collider, which means, obviously, that this rock is going to fall. And it's going to collide with this. And the computation is going to happen within here. I'm also going to bring in the ground as well. And I can plug this into the same collider. And because it's a similar material, I will. So we're going to push that in there. At the moment, this collider has got friction and bounciness. I'm going to turn that bounciness down to 0.1. What I'm hoping in the future is that we get some kind of like stickiness attributes on this. So that if we wanted rocks to kind of like stick to surfaces, we could get that. I'm sure there's a way of doing it, but right now it's not. So we've got a collider, which is that, and we've got a dynamic object. And at the moment, what should just happen is that dynamic object just falls and bounces, right? So what we need to do is just then go out instances into an output. Make sure that we're set to play back, play every frame. Now this should be pretty quick. This should simulate pretty quickly. So we might even be able to do it real time, but there we go. So what we're obviously getting is a copy of our rock. Okay, so we can hide that rock, but put it on a display layer. Don't delete it or anything like that, because we might want to move the original one around. So Bifrost is creating its own copy. So in fact, what I could do is just go playback speed to real time. We'll see how that falls. and that's pretty good. We can see this is working in real time within Maya. Now, obviously, it's like super simple, but nice to see. So I'm going to put that playback speed back to player reframe, because we're going to try and start complicating things. So back to the rigid node, we've got a bunch of attributes that you'd expect to see on a dynamic object. We can make it kinematic. We can change the method. So we could just use like a bounding box or a sphere, but convex hull works really nicely. It just creates like a more simplified mesh around the shape. We've got a start frame, so we don't have to start. We could start at like frame 15, and then nothing should happen until frame 15. Oddly, that didn't work. It might have been because my timeline's so quickly. There we go. Yeah, that's what it was. So it does work. Start frame 1. We've got mass, which is good. We want mass. We want to be able to add mass to different types of objects. So let's say this is a mass of 1. If we had another rock that was a lot smaller, we would perhaps change the mass. But we could get into all sorts of topics about mass and gravity. But let's not. So we've got like an initial speed that we could add to it. So if we wanted that to be like 50 and the direction to be -1 in y, it would push down a lot harder, which is a cool effect. We could also spin it on like x at 45 degrees at the same time, which would give you even more like initial propulsion. Which is really cool, especially if you was going to do like a whole bunch of them or something. But we'll just keep speed at 0. Friction, bounciness. I need to go through that. Sleep when active. We've got a whole bunch of activation attributes here that we can play around with. But anyway, let's get back to what we're trying to do. So obviously, we want some destruction, right? We want this to be able to break up when it hits different surfaces. So we've got a rock. So before the simulation starts, we want to add something that's going to break our rock. Okay, so we're going to start typing in. If we start typing in fracture, we can scroll right the way down to the bottom where we can see that we've got a voronoi fracture mesh. Okay, that is what we want to use, the voronoi fracture mesh. Obviously, you can find it in here as well, which is really handy these days. So you can go into Windows and tick Node Library, Windows Node Library like that, and we can see all the nodes that are in certain elements. So if we want to, look for simulation type nodes, we'd dial down simulation, look in rigid bodies or influences, aero, liquids, NPM, everything, and we can see it rather than having to do some guesswork. Which until a little while back is what we had to do. So that is a cool feature. So let's plug our voronoi fracture mesh into our object and rewind. So I've unplugged that from the rigid body in a moment. If we hit the diagnostics button, we're going to see this voronoi pattern showing up over a rock, and that is where we're going to get some destruction happening, right? Which is really cool to be able to see that. So we've got our own set of attributes sat within the fracture mesh. We've got a count, so I can take that down to like 15, and we're going to have like less fracturing going on because we've got less pieces going on. And we can also move around where that fracturing happens. So if we were to tick enable fracture center, we can start to move around where that fracture would occur, because it's like a projected pattern, and we can start to add areas of like more details. So that's quite an interesting attribute also, because you might find that actually it looks like more fracturing is going to happen on this side than this side. Let's change that. Let's sort of move it all forward in Z, and then you're going to get more fracturing happening there. And we've got a nifty little sort of center bias that we can start to sort of dial in there as well. Going into this at a later date, we'll look at other ways in which we can add fracturing to specific points on each object using curves and such. But we're not going to get into that today. Going to keep it really basic, all right? So let's leave that like that, and then let's get the count up because who wants to just have 12? Let's put this up to about 1500. Give it a second to have a think about it, and then we've got lots of fracturing going on. So we can get rid of the diagnostic attribute now and just plug the voronoi fracture mesh straight into the rigid body. And if we click on it, we can see those fracture areas within the mesh already. And what we're going to do is we are just going to play it and have a look and see what is happening to see if this does create destruction. And we can see that moving, and because we're set to play every frame, it's just scooting through those frames fairly quickly, really. And we can see we've got a bunch of fracturing going on there. So in terms of the actual look, the simulation, like how it's going, personally I'm not happy with the shape. If we're looking at this from like an art director's point of view or whatever, and thinking about surfaces, this rock, the way it exploded there into shards everywhere is kind of more like a huge lump of coal than something rock-like, so we'd want to change that and add some kind of like strength within it. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to affect the speed at which it's falling, because we still want it to fall at the speed that it's falling, right? So we need to add something else into that, and that is a constraint. So if we look within the simulation tab, we can see that we've got constraints in here, okay? We can also hit tab and just start typing in constraint. And there's one called constraint in radius, which is what we're going to use, and that's for rigid body dynamics. And there is constraint in radius there that you can just drag in if you want to. And the way this works is it works further down the tree, just after the create rigid bodies node. Okay, so we're just gonna. I like to alt drop this like that, but you can plug it in any way you want. And what this is going to do is it's going to give us some sort of strength within the object itself. So at the moment, let's just have a look and see what it's doing. And in fact, I think what we'll just do quickly, if we take that voronoi fracture count down to about 500 for a second, it's just going to allow us to start messing around with these attributes without having to wait for it to all simulate. So we can see that that rock is now staying together because we've got an unbreakable constraint set on this constraint and radius, right? So what we're going to do is make that breakable, and there's an attribute within there called breakable, okay? And this is its strength. So a low strength means that it's just going to break straight away, and a high strength means that it's going to try and retain its form. So this should just start breaking up really quickly. And we can see that it's still doing what it did before, which is not what we want. So let's take up this strength. I'm going to take it up to about 800. And we're going to have a little look, see how that affects our rock. And we'll just keep playing with these numbers. So now we can see that it's shattering slightly less on the first break, and these are staying together a lot more, but it is still breaking most of it, apart from this backside here, which is trying to stay together. So that's created a different shape already, which is quite nice. But I'd like to increase that still. So let's rewind. And I'm going to take this up to about 1200. And let's rewind and play. And potentially we just want to take it too far and see if see if it all stays together. So in some ways that's quite nice because it hasn't fallen far. And now on this next part is where it will just start coming apart and smashing more because it's like based on more gravity. So that's kind of cool. That kind of makes a bit more sense. Let's push it a bit more. Let's go 1500 and rewind. And then in a minute we'll put that resolution of the voronoi fracture up a little bit more and see how we're doing. That's kind of cool. So this is just giving it a crack at first, and a bit of fracturing, and then here it all comes apart, and that makes a lot more sense to me. That's a more interesting look, and in terms of physics, because we've dropped less here and more here, we're getting like the right kind of look. So let's go back to our original fracture. Let's put it up to about 1500, and then we'll wait and see how that looks, right? And so I'll probably pause the video and just do a quick play blast. So here's the initial result, which is actually after I've increased the resolution of the voronoi fracturing. But because I've increased the resolution of the voronoi fracturing, we're going to have to decrease the glue strength because now we're kind of gluing between more points within the volume. So this is what we've got. We just get like a small crack going on, which is quite nice actually, but it's not what we were looking for. So I'm just going to decrease this to about 1200, and we're going to pause and play blast again. So once again, I took down the strength even more, and now we got something that's sort of slightly more pleasing. Obviously, we're still like super low resolution. We haven't added any secondary effects like debris that kind of like spits up when it hits the ground, and smoke, which we would do with Bifrost Aero. They're all things we're going to look at at a later date, just to sort of start completing the look, etc. But for now, this is just like a little introduction into rigid body dynamics within Bifrost. As you can see, it's a lot faster and quicker to put together than it is just doing it standard within Maya. And we've got the fracturing as well, which to date, as far as I'm aware, has only really been possible with plugins and scripts, etc. So super exciting times. We're now starting to complete the set of simulation effects within Bifrost. It's early days still on this, but now that we've got fluids, rigid body dynamics, destruction, particles, NPM, we can see how we could start to put all of these things together and start to create some insane stuff. There are some people around at the moment doing some amazing things with this. If you look up Bruce Lee on YouTube as well, not obviously the celebrity Bruce Lee. There's another Bruce Lee. He's showing what can be done at the moment with a tool that he's building for Bifrost, which really gives you an idea of just how far you can go with this with Bifrost. So just take a look at this. This is pretty awesome. And again, early days, but yeah, movie sort of style, rigid body dynamics going on here. Some really nice secondary fracturing and aero, smoke, and that kind of thing. And this is all stuff that we'll be able to do eventually. So I hope you enjoyed it. As I said, simple, basic this time around. It's good to be back. I'll go into it one day, exactly what's been going on in my life. But yeah, hoping to do some more of these tutorials and just get back into Bifrost again. All right, take care.